budget hearing number one. The BOE is here with us tonight to order. And we will take the roll call first.
Ed Bateson, Marty Fury, Melissa Longo, Amy Ruggiero, here. Bill Gerber,
Here.
Karen McCormick,
Here.
Cindy Perham, Jeff Steele, Alex Durrell, Jeff Galdenzi,
Here.
Tom Lambert,
Here.
Sharon Pastilli,
Here.
Laura Carson,
Here.
Michelle McCabe,
Here.
Marcy Spalier, here. Liz Esma, here. Jennifer Barahona, Josh Garspa, Joe Siebert,
Here.
Sorry, Josh is here too. Sorry.
thank you. Jay Walk, Steve Behrens, Hannah Gale, Andrew Graceffa, Lisa Havey, John Kuhn,
Here.
Mark McDermott,
Here.
Joel Rivera, Karen Wackerman,
Just joined.
Here.
Cameron Chiniski, Hank Ferentz,
Here.
Pamela Acona,
Here.
Jim Myers,
Here.
Christine Brown, Drew Georgiadis, Margaret Horton, Kelly Cinto,
Here.
Pam Estorita,
Here.
Peter Britton,
Here.
Brooks Barricino, Story Tolman.
Thank you, Betsy. Let's all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Board of Ed, folks. Superintendent Dostani, welcome for your first RTM meeting hearing. Maybe just if everybody introduces themselves at the table for the public and for some of those that don't know who everybody is there. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jen Jacobson, Chair of the Board of Education. We're very happy to be here with all of you this evening to present our budget to you and answer any questions you may have. Joining me this evening is our Superintendent, Mr. Ted Stani, our, our Chief Financial Officer, Courtney Laborious, and our Director of Special Education and Student Services, Mr. Rob Mancusi.
Thank you, Jen. So, you guys, the floor is yours. So you want to give your presentation to us? That'd be great.
The superintendent will lead us through the presentation. I believe everyone should have it in their backup, and for those that are here, there are some copies, I believe, if you don't have one.
Thank you very much for the opportunity tonight to go through 324 Board of Education budget. Not going to read every slide for you. Take some time, free time to be able to go through it.
No, it has to be much closer to you.
Switch this place. Hold on.
How's that?
Still stand, those don't seem to work as well.
So we'll go through the budget presentation and then pause at the end. Questions? Gonna bore you.
So the 23-24 budget is grounded in 4 pillars: academics, professional development and growth, social emotional learning and equity, student support, and community. This budget is grounded as a fiscally responsible budget. The goals are to maintain the excellence in the Fairfield Public Schools, respect relationships with families, faculty, and community, manage costs, reallocate funds to limit increases, sustain class size goals, and support strong programming. What does this budget accomplish? It's structurally balanced, strategic, focuses on a return on investment, and limits increases to the overall tax base. As you're well aware, people come to this community mostly for the schools and the community. So before I highlight the ask, I just want to go through the why. Fairfield has an A+ overall niche grade. 202 students across the district earned the seal of biliteracy last year. We have 5 schools of distinction in 2022. 6 national merit semifinalists. 3 of our elementary schools are in the top 10 for ELA performance in the state of Connecticut. 1 elementary school ranked #1 in the state for growth in a high-needs subgroup. One of our high schools earned the highest math proficiency in the math SAT indicator in our DIRG. We had 108 AP scholars. 85% of our AP test takers earned a 3+ or higher. We're voted the best community for music education. 15 Fairfield Public School art students named Scholastic Art Award winners. 86 students were selected for the Connecticut Music Educators Association Western Regional Festival. We provide our students with a number of experiences and opportunities. We have 19 Connecticut Regional Scholastic Art Award winners. We have artwork created by our high school students that were selected for the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth Emerging Young Artists Juried Competition. Our staff is highly trained. A Tomlinson art teacher won the Paley Grant to create a mosaic mural. Roger Ludlow Middle School teacher and Fairfield art students are highlighted in an article, Time for Kids. Community outreach. Memory Project artists created portraits for youths around the world who have experienced extreme neglect and poverty. The recycled animal sculpture exhibit was created by our students here in Fairfield. Their life-size animal sculpture created by Fairfield Ludlow High School art students, and they're exhibited at the Fairfield Library downtown branch if you haven't seen. 120 holiday cards were created for the residents of the Carlton by our Honor Society students, and a collaborative pumpkin painting with 5th grade students from Osborne Hill was facilitated by the National Art Honor Society students. 207 students were selected for the Western Regional Festival to participate with the Boston Children's Chorus. Clinic and performance with the Canadian Brass, a world-renowned performing ensemble. The annual townwide music festival uniting musicians from every school in the district to perform in a combined concert develops community spirit. And as you've all probably experienced, there was 4 sold-out performances to each of our high schools' annual holiday concerts. Matinee performances of these holiday concerts were performed for members of the local senior center and the annual performance at the Town of Fairfield's tree lighting. The Veterans Day concert is held at many of our schools. The town's Holocaust Memorial event, the annual Memorial Day parade. 1 in 6 music faculty are Fairfield Public School alumni. Kelly O'Hara, Tony Award-winning Broadway star, and John Mayer, Grammy Award-winning musician. 50+ honors and advanced placement courses are offered at our high schools. Our 22 graduates were accepted to over 150 universities and colleges. Ward and Ludlow students participate in 40 varsity athletic teams and 30 sub-varsity athletic teams. Over 92% of our students participate in post-secondary education. We provide our students with early colleges experiences through UConn and Sacred Heart universities. And our high school students, as you're just made aware, engage in a variety of art, drama, and music programs. We had 43 student athletes participate in College Signing Day, 19 FCAC championships, 4 division winners, 18 state championships, 28 all-state recipients. These are just some of the highlights of the return on investment here in the Fairfield Public Schools. So what's the ask? The original budget that was approved by the Fairfield Board of Education was a 4.05% increase, which would have brought our budget to $210,695,578. That was voted on and approved on January 26, 2023. The Board of Selectmen recommended a $210,195,578 recommended budget. That was a reduction of $500,000. That reduced our percent increase to 3.8%. Just last week, the Board of Finance recommended a $210,163,445, which is 3.79%, and that accounts for an adjustment in the pension estimate of about $32,000. And that brings us here today. Some of the examples of budget efficiencies: non-resident tuition program, parking fees, athletic gate fees, Chromebook insurance fees generate about $350,000 in revenue. Our Early Literacy Academy over at McKinley School has a cost avoidance for in-house services for elementary students with dyslexia, and significant language-based disabilities at about $550,000 annually. Our new Chromebook rollout model by grade and pre-purchasing with current year surplus has reduced the ask in this year's budget. And we are investing in engaging software for print and energy management and utilizing consortium pricing for educational materials. So as you can see, we're trying our best to offset any increases with more effective and more efficient ways of operations. 3.86% of the original 4.05% overall budget are contractual obligations, insurance benefits, an increase to our valued paraeducator compensation, and mandated staffing. Almost $3 million, a little over 2.8 or 1.4% as full-time contracts. We have an increase of about $500,000 in mandated staffing for our English language learner population. That is increasing. We have a little over $300,000 for mental health supports that our students desperately need. As we come out of the COVID pandemic, we're seeing an increase in the number of students that are struggling with social emotional well-being. And $1.8 million is an increase to our paraeducator compensation, which will keep our valuable paraeducators who work with our most vulnerable students in district for a more consistent support system for our students here in Fairfield. We have a slight increase of about 0.25% related to utilities, critical IT, facility infrastructure, and transportation. Again, minimal when it comes to the overall budget. It's slightly over $1 million. We did offset some of our reductions to keep in mind here, about $800,000 in instruction services and fees, almost $100,000 in savings in contracted services, $250,000 in capital equipment, and about $50,000 in purchase services. This is a reduction of a little over $1.1 million. That offsets some of the increase in book supplies and materials, which is about $187,000. Our out-of-district tuition, which funds all special ed contracts for projected student needs at $600,000. So this minimizes the increase of about $1 million because of the offsets. Some of our budget lines with reductions are tech capital outlay, tech systems and equipment maintenance, district technology supplies, supplies and materials, speech services, nursing services. This is not related to school nurses, but services for students that have needs that are mandated by their disabilities. professional consultations for special education, copy services, as I mentioned earlier, math assessment, math program improvement, and instructional staff development. Here's where we see some items. So some of the questions that have come up is that there's been a slight reduction in enrollment over time, and why isn't the budget seeing that same kind of decline? The trend across the state of Connecticut is a significant decline in the number of students enrolled in public education, but the needs of those students that are enrolled are increasing, with a upward trend in students with that have been identified needing special education services. So at that point, you can see here in Fairfield, we are at about 17% of the population that require special education services, which becomes more costly in making sure that those students receive the support they need in order to learn and grow like their peers. And that can be very much shown here in this graph. This reflects the current enrollment of students in the state of Connecticut. There's been a 12% decrease in the number of students since 2007, and as you can see, there's been almost a 26% increase in the number of students that have been identified as needing specialized services. As you can see here in this graph, in Fairfield County per pupil expenditure, we're right in the middle. We're about average for the state. And this isn't to say, and I know it came up as part of the Board of Finance, that we're looking to spend the same per pupil as some districts that may be considered Durg A or wealthier, but just to show you a comparison on where we stand with our Fairfield County counterparts, we are remaining competitive to maintain a high level of service for our students. So these are some of the things that we look at as we started to build the budget, some of the contractual pressures and mandates that are pushing the scales to increase, and then critical investments and cost management. So we're trying a balancing act to make sure that we maintain our high quality of services, but not overextend the ask, because we know over time that's not a sustainable model for the town. This summarizes a lot of where the money in the ask and what some of the stressors in this year's budget. Again, we tried to minimize what costs were added to the budget. As you can see, that the contractual obligations and the increase in insurance makes up the vast majority. There's a slight increase because of the offsets that we were able to find to continue to operate more efficiently and more effectively. As was stated at the beginning, this is my first budget here in Fairfield. As time goes on, we're looking at past increases to the budget, those services that were added, personnel, and evaluating the effectiveness that those programs and those services are having on our students, and in future budgets, how we can be even more effective and more efficient, and look at where we can make adjustments in the budget to get a better return on investment for the money being spent here in Fairfield. This is an executive summary you can take a look at. It just highlights the budget, the actual budget, estimated, proposed increases, decreases, and percentage over time. Before I end, I just want to talk a little bit about future budgets, because as we plan this budget, we are looking ahead to next year. Teacher contract is up, and we will enter in the fall in teacher negotiations. I can tell you that's going to be a large component of next year's budget, the contractual obligations and how we will settle that contract. Fairfield is not very competitive in the Fairfield County market when it comes to compensating teachers. If we're going to be able to attract, retain high-quality teachers in our classrooms, we're going to have to really look at how we compensate and how we put together the contract for next year moving forward. So that's going to be one of the things that I think is going to be important, and that was taken into consideration as we plan this year's budget.
Thank you, Mr. Testani. Okay, I'm going to open it up to the body. If you're on WebEx, please put your name in the chat box so we can see if you have any questions to call on you. I'll start in the room first. Anybody want to lead off? Any questions? Representative Spolier.
Hi, Representative Spolier, District 4. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this budget. I think it's a good overall budget. I did have a couple of questions. My first question was, I noticed that the position for the diversity, equity, and inclusion position that was in the, I believe it was in the ARPA funds, was cut entirely. And I just wanted to know how you kind of are going to absorb those roles, or how you're going to address that within this budget.
So we do have funding that we are looking at currently and bringing in outside consultants that will be able to lead the work. The process now of setting up the next 14 months of what that will look like. There's a robust program that we're looking to put together and utilize two different vendors and entities that worked with in the past that will provide framework that is sustainable over time, that will see within the district, really change the way we operate.
So those vendors are currently in this budget, the cost of those vendors?
Yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. I also had a question, Mr. Moderator. I appreciate you mentioning the teacher's contract as not really being reflective in this budget, but something that's going to impact us next year. Do you feel like there's anything else that you didn't add to this budget that's missing from this budget?
Well, I think as we assess what we currently hold true here in Fairfield and to see where we can make some alterations, and I think mental health services is going to be some driver as we move forward. More and more kids are experiencing mental health needs, and Rob and I have talked extensively, and the rest of the team, how we're going to be able to meet those needs as a public education entity, equipped, and what services we're going to need to be able. It's always going to be a challenge. Going to have enough. It's really trying to.
Be strategic on where.
Mr. Moderator, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but we cannot hear Mr. Testani. If you don't mind speaking into the mic. Sorry about that.
Okay.
We
So
just
we're
wanna
really
hear.
looking to see where we can target and where we need to target services to make sure we reach our students and be more proactive than reactive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Spolier. Representative Zesma.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Liz Esma, District 4, and also I want to echo my thanks for all the work that you put into this budget. Can you explain to us the non-lapsing account that I believe was created by the Board of Finance, and for what purpose will it be used?
Thank you so much for the question. Courtney Laborious, Chief Financial Officer for Board of Education. I'm sorry, Fairfield Public Schools. So we don't have a non-lapsing account created currently. The Board of Finance, the Board of Education applied for and received FEMA reimbursement for expenses that happened in the 2020-2021 fiscal years as a result of the pandemic. And so for things such as PPE and sanitizing equipment, so safety. It was taxpayer money that went back to the town. And the first select woman did mention in her budget presentation that she's looking for a mechanism potentially to give it back to the Board of Education. And the Board of Education is looking at potential uses of those funds. The town did receive those funds last week. And so we're in conversation with the auditor and also the Board of Ed and the town offices to find out what the best use of those monies will be. But there isn't currently a non-lapsing, and likely there wouldn't be required to be a non-lapsing because we did receive it in this fiscal year.
And currently, we do have some thoughts on how to best use that on one-time purchases, not to create a future fiscal cliff in the budget for future years.
Right. Thank you. And you have ARPA funds still unused?
We do have some funds that we currently have allocated in different buckets, dedicated to things like social emotional learning initiatives and some other initiatives that are not reflective here in the budget
Okay.
that would otherwise have been in the budget.
Things that tend to be one-time because it has a limited
Correct.
use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Zesma. Representative Astorita.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ken Astorita, District 10. Again, I'd like to reiterate, thank you, everybody, for your effort putting this together. This is what I'm trying to understand. So I look at your budget, and it looks to me like we're adding about 11 staff. And I'm looking, and I'm referring to, in the big book, categories 105, 107, 109. So school admin staff.
Give a page, Ken.
If there's no, actually, yeah,
This
it looks like
page is
page 11 in
Thank
the
you.
second section, I think. So it looks like you're adding 11 to staff. And I guess my question is, in an environment where, enrollment is decreasing, albeit it is gradual, why are we adding staff?
I'm not quite sure what staff you're referring to. The only admin staff that are being added is a real allocation of 11 positions. So currently, at our elementary schools, they have a position called an EPF. It is a teacher on special assignment who is a quasi-administrator, but lacks the ability to supervise and evaluate teachers. So those positions will be gone, and they will be converted to assistant principals. So the slight increase to the budget will give us more accountability and more oversight in supporting teacher development and evaluation.
So what you're saying is your overall headcount is still the same?
In that area, yes. So it's 11 EPFs that will be eliminated from the budget and 11 assistant principals, which is a slight increase based on the differential in salary.
Where would the assistant principal's headcount now be reflected?
I think a good summary to look at would be on page 160, which summarizes all of the information from the previous pages that shows all of the headcount changes. And we can walk you through that if you're interested, but there is a net increase of 10.85 headcount to the Board of Education budget for these reasons. One of which, for example, is the elementary school. We do have course size that we maintain, class sizes in the elementary school. So a part of that, the elementary school increase, for example, is to maintain the policy-driven course size that we expect for Fairfield Public Schools at the elementary schools. So even if you have a level elementary school enrollment, kids may show up in a different school in a different way. Because we have prescribed course enrollments, this is based on making sure that the class sizes maintain and stay the size that we've decided is good for Fairfield Public Schools.
So
That's just one example, but if you want to know anything specific, so if you're asking about the EPFs or the APs, is that specifically what the question is? Yeah, you can see we added 11 assistant principals, but that's offset by a decrease of 10 EPF, elementary program facilitators. It's up on the top on the right. So it's a reconfiguration of the title that I think Mr. Testani can explain, because the town might like to know a little bit more about that.
Yep, please.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the elementary program facilitators are quasi-administrators. They lack the main responsibility, which is to evaluate staff. So they can act to a certain degree, but they are teachers that are just on special assignment currently. And what we really need is oversight and support of our teachers, and that will allow us with somebody who currently is in the administrative ranks, holds a certain certification or credential called an 092.
Have you had a chance, and I know you just started, but have you had a chance to evaluate the I'll call it outside the classroom staff in the school district to determine if there are areas where we can save if there are redundancies, things of that nature. Have you done that yet?
Well, we are in the process of looking at all the positions that are, as you say, outside of the classroom to see what kind of return on investment we're getting, what the roles that they serve, how they're being utilized. There are some areas we think that we can be a little bit more efficient moving forward, but not quite there yet. We do have the rollout in the elementary schools of new ELA curriculum, so that's going to be a heavy lift. So making sure that we have the proper support in our buildings to support teachers in the new curriculum rollout, curriculum writing over the next year is going to be critical.
And just one last question, and I apologize, I was trying to figure this out going through the budget, but is there like a standard ratio that's used to apply sort of pupil to staffing expense? And again, I mean like non-teaching. And if that is the case, where would Fairfield rank with a number like that compared to its peers?
It all depends which staffing you're looking at. I mean, we're adding an assistant principal.
All staffing that doesn't teach kids.
Well, again, if we're putting an assistant principal, there are districts in the elementary level that have 2 assistant principals. So do we need 2? No, I think 1 is sufficient. When you look at student support staff, there are recommended ratio of students to staffs, for example, school counselors and those things, but depending on the population of students. I mean, we have a pretty good ratio of school counselors to students at our high schools, but we also have a high number of students that go on, as I mentioned, 92% go on to post-secondary opportunities. So we need a below the average ratio to make sure that the student applications to their colleges, their recommendations, their FAFSA forms, for example, all of those things are done to meet the needs of those kids. Anybody who's a parent who has a child that's going through the college process will know that it's an important component to make sure that school counselor knows their child well and is able to meet their needs as they apply to the schools that they hope to move on from Fairfield and the rest of their lives. So I think we're slightly below the recommended average nationwide, but not to a point where it's not effective. I think we provide a better service to our students, and I think it would be detrimental if we reduce that and increase the size of, especially now post-COVID. I think we're looking to add more additional student support. Many of our school psychologists, school social workers are being overwhelmed with the number of students that have mental health needs. There are not a lot of providers outside of school, private providers that can see kids. So it's really falling back on our schools to be able to take on the responsibilities that, you know, in the past, you know, a therapist outside of school would probably be able to see, but it's now fallen back on the responsibility of our school staff, and they need to be able to do their jobs and do them well.
Can I follow up with that just for 1 second? Also, we did have some staff in the ARP funds, knowing that that's a recurring item, pulling a couple of those out of the ARP funds, moving in those one-time purchases. We've been very conscious throughout the ARP funding period, our board, to make sure as best as humanly possible to not create those cliffs that the nation will be seeing starting next year. So, for example, the family and community liaison position was an ARP funded position. We've moved that into the operating now because that will be a position that continues on. So there were some of those nets. There was some central office reorganization. So when you see ads, there were also offsets. A lot of it is also student need driven. So every district may be different in terms of what the population requires, in terms of what the staffing is needed to meet their needs, plus any additional new mandates that may come from the state, et cetera. So it's generally pretty nuanced type stuff.
Just one last question, and you said something that just kind of made me think of this, and this kind of backs up the question that Representative Spolier said about, is there anything that's like not in the budget? And I guess my question is, how are you projecting out like the special needs stuff that's now happening? do you have any ability to try to forecast that and project, what that's going to entail as we go forward here?
What I can say is the number of referrals we're getting for special education has increased. The number of students that we're identifying as eligible for special education has increased. The number of students who are experiencing mental health crises on a daily basis continues to increase. So based on those increases, we can project that we're going to need additional staff because our school psychs and social workers and school counselors are being challenged to the point where we've had to contract for some staff this year because there is a staffing shortage in some of those areas where we've not been able to fill positions. And then we know that our numbers of students in elementary level from three up are continuing to increase. So.
Okay, thank you.
One of the structural issues before we move on from that question is that the board, and in collaboration with many of the boards in this town, was to really build some in-house programming across our levels at the elementary, middle, and high school. And of course, that programming comes with needs, right? You have to staff those programs. However, the offset to that is a reduction in the outplacement tuition, hopefully over time, right? So last year we had a large investment, which was a very large adjustment to right-size the tuition number. It was causing a lot of deficits over the last few years, so we thank and appreciate very much last year's budget in terms of being able to do that. We're seeing some return on that with some estimated reductions in outplacements this year. So as you hear things like we're doing another ELA Academy or we're adding another CLC, yes, that is an investment that costs additional staff into the budget. However, when you net that out versus they would be going to an outplacement, we've done that analysis in the initial work, and we're happy to send that presentation to you in terms of we had a special ed update earlier in the year. It's available online, but really making those investments in-house, it may look like it's adding to the budget, but if you think of it in terms of an offset of what it might be if we had to outplace, it actually is a savings to the community. We hope to keep all our kids as close to home and obviously with their friends and peers as best that we can.
Thank you, Representative Astorita. Just a quick question. In looking at the, you said it was a balance of going from, you going to 11 assistant principals, but I only see 10 EPF. Was one of the elementary schools sharing somebody or didn't have one, or what's the?
One was in a grant, actually, and so we reduced that from the grant and shifted a board position into the grant. It's not one of the grants that we talk about when we talk about the CLIF. Because it's one that we can anticipate having pretty steady funding. We have over time, it's a title grant, but it doesn't allow for the title AP. And so we just shifted in a different eligible staff member into there. So you could see that if you look at, I'm not sure which line, 1.0 grant funded budget.
161 also has the grants.
Elementary LAS was shifted into the grant. So it's a net impact of 0, but you see a -10 and a -1 LAS.
Yeah, some might think it's a net increase of 1, so I just want to clarify that for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Gale, I think you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Hi, my name is Hannah Gale, Dr. Hannah Gale. I'm from District 6, and I'm a former teacher. I was a Waldorf school teacher, so I have a lot of interest in education for about 15 years. So I'm going to push back a little bit on some of the assumptions that I, am hearing in regard to these counseling needs and what's going on with the population. So. From what I gathered, you're saying that this 26% increase in special needs kids in general is what's driving the entire budget increase at this point. And last year, well, that's kind of what I got. And there's this 17% at this point special needs student population out of the total population. Is that correct?
Correct, a little over 17%.
Yeah. Okay. And I believe I did hear him say that it was this increase in special student needs that's really driving so much of the increase relative to the downtrend in enrollment.
Well, that's part of it, and
Yeah.
the other part of it is when you sprinkle the decline in enrollment over 17 schools,
Right.
You know, some people would ask, and they have asked, why can't you cut staff? Well, if you're cutting, you know, 3 kids out of one elementary school, it doesn't reduce
Yeah.
enough to, as you would know, to eliminate a class.
Yeah.
And at a high school level, to cut any type of staffing, there needs to be a significant reduction in the number of students that attend those schools, so.
Right, we want to keep those programs, yeah,
Right.
and
Yeah.
just so you know, like, I'm utterly supportive
Yeah.
of Fairfield education, and my son graduated from Fairfield Ward, I absolutely adore it, you know, so I support a lot of what your asks are, but, you know, I sort of feel like we've been hearing this for many years now, that it's this special education needs that are really driving everything in terms of the increasing costs, and I understand that, and I understand that for these individual families, I mean, you know, from what I understand, it's actually very difficult to get services at this point. That there are a lot of, you know, because there's so much need, it's hard for parents to get the services that they need. So there's actually even more need than is being addressed if we were going to, you know, take everyone's child who was asking for services. But I feel like there's no way to get an overview of what's going on currently. Like, all we know is that this phenomena is occurring, and there are more and more special needs children. I'm wondering if there is, you know, from a sort of, you know, any idea of some sort of a research or accounting to give us sort of like a breakdown of ICD-10s, you know, a breakdown of what the actual needs are of the kids, because, you know, and I understand that hasn't really been done in the past, that it hasn't been necessary. I'm beginning to wonder if we really want to get more of an overview of what's going on, and, you know, maybe looking towards that in the future. But the thing that I really want to push back on a little bit is your statement about there being no services in the greater community, and therefore things are falling back on the school. And, you know, I really believe that we're muddying the waters here. I see your point. I agree with you. My son was at American University, and couldn't get counseling services because of how bad the need was. This is just a general phenomenon that's going on. Young people need help, and there's not enough help for them. But I really think we're really getting into trouble if we try to fund that, because there is so much need out there. And you know, on some level, there needs to be some sort of a separation between medical and education. And I am very concerned that as we move towards this greater amount of social services and nursing staff and all of that, we keep funneling, you know, towards pharmaceuticals, and, you know, that's really, it's going to be a compounding problem.
Listen, I don't disagree that it would be nice that as a public school system that we could focus solely on education, but unfortunately the reality is we have kids that walk through the doors every day that are hurting. It is our responsibility as educators to meet those needs. Parents are begging us to meet those needs. And I would not be doing my job if I don't advocate for services until a solution can be found. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure the kids are well taken care of, whether that's adding 5 social workers or until someone else can fill the void. I don't know what else there is to say, because we have experienced in this community loss, and on my watch, I will not sit back and allow students and families to feel loss when we know that there's a problem and we need to address it. If not, who will?
No, and believe me, I understand. And as a teacher, I completely understand that you have children in need and you want to address their needs. But I'm sort of suggesting that we need to take a step back here and really begin to get our mind around the larger picture, because, you know, adding to all of this is going to be the increased burden on these parents. You know, there's a really serious financial picture that we're all looking into. And we did have this 6-point whatever increase last year that we tried to get, you know, reduced, and we wound up passing the entire thing, and now you're coming back with, again, another high percentage of increase, and it's just, once again, we're sort of feeding the same dragon.
Well, with all due respect, the increase ask is 3.79%, and 95% of that are contractual obligations and insurance costs. So the overall increase of ask is less than 0.25% to the budget. So I think we have done a good job to be more responsible. I don't know, and I can't speak to last year, but this is a bare bones ask. I don't think we can do very much else in this budget without.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate everything you said, and I'm just gonna, suggest that, there are a couple, that we need to start thinking of ways to get our arms around the bigger picture.
Oh, we're talking about that every day.
And one of those also might be really, more involvement of, religious services, other community services, just to network to try to provide some of the social services that are needed.
Happy to have those discussions with any community-based agency that would like to do that in part.
Thank you, Representative
Thank you.
Gale. Representative Myers.
Jim Myers, District 8. I guess I wanted to ask the question that Hannah Gale asked a little bit differently, because I looked at the numbers for the special ed and growth over time, and first of all, I think I was kind of relieved that the number was 17%, and I looked at other towns on this comparison, and we don't stick out. I really thought that we stuck out, and that was a concern of mine that, that Fairfield was, unusual. So I don't think we're unusual. But what I do worry about, and I look at this like per pupil spend, my question would be, and I'm not asking for the number, but, qualitatively how we address these needs, quantitatively, are we spending more than other towns to meet these needs? Because I sometimes feel that, it's almost like unlimited funds when it comes to addressing these needs. I mean, you almost said it in your words, like you're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that these kids get taken care of. But is there a certain amount that you just have to say, there aren't unlimited needs for the 87% of the students who don't have special needs. Like, we're not giving them extra help, or we're not going crazy. So I guess my question is there a baseline that you just say enough is enough, if that's fair?
Well, I think we do have a baseline. We built from zero, basically, the contractual obligations. We need to pay our staff. There are, contracts that call for increases. And I think they're not they're outrageous. Like I said, we are lagging behind in how we compensate our staffing here in Fairfield. If we want to retain high-quality staff and recruit as we start to lose folks to other districts or to retirement, we're going to need to do better. But I don't see us in a unlimited. I said we want to meet all the needs. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to cost us more money, but we're going to make every effort as we assess and time goes on. We're going to look at how we currently utilize staff, if we can be more efficient and more effective. And I think we're doing that. First step was the EPFs being transformed into assistant principals. And I think, my hope is that will have a trickle-down effect in next year's budget and future budgets. But we'll see how we're going to evaluate that as time goes on. But I do see that we can see a shift in how we use resources as a result of that. That's just one example.
Might I just add, Mr. Tassani, we also did drop this year in terms of year-over-year spend in special education as a result of some of the in-house programming that Mr. Mancusi has done as a result of a critical look at the contracts and our zero-based approach to budgeting this year. So although it is a big looming thing on our minds as part of our daily work, it's not a big share of this particular budget. in terms of the increase. It's actually decreased year over year from last year's budget because we did have that right size correct a look at the budget last year. And so although resources are being dedicated, it's not actually an increase to the budget this year.
We're also looking at developing some more in-house programs that will bring more students back that are currently in out-of-district placements. Rob's been working extremely hard with some to provide some services that otherwise we send to other places right now. So we have developed some new relationships that we're hoping will bring back several students that are costing us significant dollars.
If I can just, Rob Mancusi, Executive Director of Special Education. You've heard every year us say that, special education costs are, they're increasing. They're also, in many instances, unpredictable. We project what we know we have, and we can project best what we think is going to become. But we've had students before in the Fairfield Public Schools who have $500,000 programs because of the severity of their disabilities. We could have one or two of those students move in that we don't know are coming yet, and that will impact our budget. We had a decrease in our excess cost reimbursement of hundreds of thousands of dollars last year that we did not know was going to be bestowed upon us by the state, so we didn't project that. And I just use those as examples of the volatility that sometimes exists in the world of special education.
Thank you, Representative Myers. Representative Wolk was next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Representative Wolk, District 5. Always good to see you, Chairwoman Jacobson. And it's nice to meet you, finally, Superintendent Testani.
Thank you.
And thank you for everything that you're doing for our kids in our town. My question, I have a couple things. My question is, one is, the budget was cut by how much finally? Was it, I think, Jen, you said it was 500?
The reduction was 500 by the Board of Selectmen, and then there was an adjustment made on the pension estimate by about $32,000 bucks.
So basically, it's around the $500,000 mark that they're cutting from you. Okay, this goes on every year.
I'm sorry, Jay, to cut you off. Mr. Testani, could you use that other mic because they're still complaining about not being able to hear you? Well, Jen has one there. I apologize, but that
you got to hold the button.
These mics are better. They seem to be better than that one, but
anyway, sorry. But anyway, I guess where were we? Yeah, the $500,000. Where, and this goes on every year. I was about to say it's mind-boggling, but I know it's a loaded question. Where would this hurt our students, this money? Where does it, is there, not having this $500,000, what would it do to you guys?
Thankfully, when we built the budget that was approved originally by the Board of Education, we utilized insurance increase numbers from the state. We projected at the high end of the range that they provided us. Since then, we've been informed and updated that that number is going to be lower than originally reported, to the tune of about close to $500,000. So it looks like it'll be a net zero on the reduction based on what new insurance numbers we've been provided.
So it's not that bad then. So that's good to hear.
It is good to hear.
Finally. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, say that going back to Representative Astorita's question about staffing and things, let's not forget our country right now is in here, and I'm sure it's affecting us also, that we are having teacher shortages, major teacher shortages. It's hurting our students. And this doesn't, by the way, just because there's teacher shortages doesn't mean that it's, should cut the budget because there's no teachers. Where is this hurting you guys right now?
We have some vacancies that are already known for next year. We had a job fair today we hosted at Fairfield Ward High School from 3 to 7 p.m. Some of the areas that we have known vacancies are in the areas of math and science, world language, special education. And those are going to be quite difficult to fill based on the needs that other districts are facing the same needs. So it is a problem. We're trying to be proactive and do our hiring early, but everyone has that same mentality. So if you know anyone that is interested in hold certification or would like to consider, we can work with them to try to get them certified as we try to fill those needs. I'm more than happy to refer them to our HR department. We are also, as a result of, as mentioned, the paraeducation compensation that is a major part of this budget is filling a huge need based on the fact that we were severely underpaying our paraprofessionals, which was causing us to have a huge shortage. And again, those are students that are the most vulnerable, that need the services. So we're hopeful that this adjustment to the salary schedule will help us be able to fill those vacancies moving forward.
Paras are very important. They helped my daughter, and she was in special education too in the school system, and she's doing very well now in Sacred Heart. So I want to thank all of you. This has been, since I've moved here, we moved here for the school systems also, and my kids thrived in school and in college. So, but what I want to add, and on this, Mr. Moderator, is saying that some people in our town say that you guys have too much money. I say that you don't have enough money.
Thank you, Representative Volk. Just if you, what are you forecasting for retirements right now as far as who is checked in with you?
Our budget has 19.
19?
Year to date, I think we've received, last I checked last week, about 11 notifications, formal notifications, and about 5 on the radar. So we're about where we would expect to be to hit our number of 19, whereas in the past, it was, the past 2 years, it was well above that, because unfortunately, we saw a mass
Right,
retirement.
mass exit, it's unfortunately. Okay, Representative Gerber.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for being here, and thanks for asking my question, answering my questions. Bill Gerber, District 2. There's a little known gem, because most people don't get that far in the budget, but page 120 is kind of my favorite page, but I just wanted to double check that you guys feel confident that I should be looking at this page, because this is sort of programs that with allocations where you sort of go by. So should I be looking at this? Because yeah, here is where people could see that, you know, fully allocated, at least on the program side. It seems like some stuff's missing. 65 head count is missing, but on the program side, special education increased by 0.82%, so it was a really small increase from the estimated actual.
Yeah, this is a look by program, so it does include the head count, as opposed to other looks in the book separate them out, or staffing, I mean, so yes.
Okay, thanks. And I just want to back up a little to the teachers' salaries, because I heard you say something at the Board of Finance meeting, and there was a number like 12% underpaid or something like that versus the market. Was that right?
Yeah, so a little over a year ago, as I was doing some comparisons to try to advocate at the state for some creative ways to help compensate teachers in districts that were struggling with funding to be able to retain and recruit teachers, as I started to look at surrounding districts, to my surprise, one of the districts I could not utilize as an example was Fairfield. And now that I'm here, and you know, one of the great joys of a lot of our teachers are they live in town, their kids are in school here, so they reap the benefits of everything that Fairfield has to offer. But as those folks are starting to retire and we're looking to recruit teachers, one of the things that has been a barrier in a lot of cases of the folks that I've talked to is the compensation is not as competitive as you're going to get driving 10 or 15 minutes up the line. So I think it's something we're going to really have to look at as we enter into negotiations with the union to make sure, I mean, we're not going to hit a home run and be competitive with New Canaan and Darien, and I don't think we need to be, but I do think that we need to do better if we're going to be able to attract and then keep these folks. That's one of the contributions to why teachers stay is compensation. Now, there's a whole host of other issues that don't cost us anything that we are looking to build more support so that teachers do not leave Fairfield within the first 5 years of employment or leave the profession altogether.
Do you know how we compare to Trumbull?
We're less.
And is that sort of across all levels, or is it mainly starting? Does it flatten out over time? Or?
It catches up at the end, but it takes a significant period of time to get to the top step here in Fairfield. We have a lot of steps compared to some other districts, but you know, we are slightly below, just to give you an idea, teachers with a master's degree coming out of college is going to earn a little over $52,000. So where, you know, right across the border in a poor district, they're going to earn slightly less, but not much less, probably about $48,000.
Okay, and do we measure turnover in Fairfield? And that's one question. And then do we get stats from other towns?
Well, we meet regularly as a Southern Fairfield County group of superintendents, and we talk a lot about certain issues. They're not seeing the amount of turnover in places like Darien and New Canaan as we are. They're not as large. But places like Norwalk, Stamford, they are experiencing high turnover, but we're all competing with each other for the same staff. So our best bet as we see people retire or leave is to try to grab more experienced teachers so that we can plug and play, and that's not going to get us the same amount of savings as maybe 10 years ago, where you would just grab a recent college graduate and start them at the lower end. We want to be competitive. We want to put good people in front of our students. So as somebody retires, we may fill that with somebody that's a more veteran teacher. So the difference in pay is not going to be significant, and the savings isn't going to be what we once realized, you know, a decade ago.
Is turnover, like this annual turnover, recent annual turnover, something you can talk about, or like, do you have that number? Or?
Our HR department would be more equipped to handle that.
Okay. I personally, you know, so you've got salary. I've talked to some people who say one of the big problems is for morale is the amount of paperwork that they have to do for IEPs and things like that, that they'll be working till, you know, 11 o'clock at night. You'll be grading papers because some of the other stuff takes up a lot of their day. Is that the same everywhere? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And the new system that was implemented statewide this year, CT SEDS, has been a major contributor to that. The rollout was statewide, every district, despite many superintendents asking for a phase-in and trying to pilot it and roll it out in smaller districts first. But the state decided to pull the Band-Aid off, and it's caused a lot of additional time and effort in developing the IEPs and getting all that entered into the system.
So I guess it's pretty obvious that there's a concern not just on compensation, competitiveness, but also like people wanting to go into teaching, because if that's what they're spending their days on. Is there a way around that that you can budget for, or is there any way to add people to do some of that work or streamline the processes through technology? I'm just asking.
It is an online platform, and that's one of the challenges, is really navigating the platform, but also finding the time, because as Rob said, the number of students being referred causes paperwork, whether they qualify or not. So It's very time consuming, and then the annual PPTs, the triennials, so it becomes a heavy lift.
What I will say is, and we're no different than any other special education department in Connecticut in terms of the challenge that the new system has created for us. We do have regular meetings with our staff. We do this year, we've particularly allocated some of our meeting times with them. We've made our meetings a little bit shorter so they can get back and work on getting acclimated to the new system, because it is more time consuming, because it's a new system and they're just learning it as we're doing it.
Thank you. And one final question. I don't think we've ever really done this well, but Ms. Jacobson might be able to tell me. But exit interviews, like if we have turnover, are you getting? Mr. Testani, I know that it's too early for you, but are we getting that information, or do you intend to get
HR is doing that, yes. Trying to get a better handle on whether they're leaving us altogether or they're leaving us for another district and the rationale why, or moving.
Are those things that maybe in future budget books you can incorporate, like turnover and sort of an explanation of why? Because that might drive some of your line items.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gerber. Representative Iacono, you said yes in the chat. Does that mean you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to say to you, if you could please come to somebody on WebEx, that'd be awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. We're the redheaded stepchildren over here. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Pamela Iacono, District 8. I just had a quick comment, and I just wanted to compliment you, Mr. Testani. First of all, welcome formally to Fairfield Public Schools. I'm really thrilled you're here. I think you did a fantastic job with the budget, really looking to streamline it, taking it from not only a perspective of what's best for children, but how to do that from a business standpoint as well. And I really appreciate that. I also just wanted to compliment you on being able to accomplish a paraprofessional contract that was a long time coming, to you and to the board for finally getting that done. I know we tried to do that when I was on the board, and that was close to 15 years ago, and many others have tried since then to make that happen. So I'm really glad that finally took place. I've been very happy with everything that you've told us, and the fact that you are also looking forward, and that you know that this type of growth isn't necessarily sustainable, and it's good to look at things with a fresh eye and how to approach things. And I most appreciate the fact it is so obvious to me that your first priority is children. So thank you. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Also, Representative Carson on WebEx.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Laura Carson, District 4. Welcome, Mr. Testani, and thank you all for all the hard work. I know it's a lot of stuff that you're dealing with, putting this budget together and all the needs that you're pulled in a million directions. So I really appreciate all your hard work. Just a couple of things. Can you just explain where you see the most issues concerning, if you can answer this, social, emotional issues, whether it's high school level, middle school, elementary? Is it across the board, all similar, all the children that are suffering? Do you feel it's across the board, it's in each school, or does one school stand out more than, one level of school stand out more than the other? Where do you see most of the emotional issues occurring?
We're seeing it across the board, starting in elementary school, early elementary school. The behaviors are becoming more difficult. Kids are not self-regulated. I think some of that is attributed to the lack of their early experience because of COVID, but I think there's a lot of contributing factors as well. But it's across the board, different needs for different levels, but no less severe.
And I know that there was a lot of emotional issues pre-COVID. a lot of pressure kids felt, social media. But do you think as the kids are getting more back to normal from COVID, do you think some of that will decline? Some of that COVID related stress will dissipate?
I think to your point, I think this existed before COVID. It's just now been more realized. I think we were on this trajectory to begin with. You mentioned social media and academic pressure that is high stakes across many of our students wanting to do their very best. I think that we are looking at, and we're happy with some initiatives that we're going to be kicking off. We have a committee of folks that have been working on this, and we're hoping that this will be able to provide some SEL education to all our students at all levels to be able to start to curb some of those mental health needs long term.
Do you discuss anything about the encouraging children maybe to understand how detrimental social media is, or noticing that a lot of what they see on social media isn't the reality for, I know a lot of kids feel like, oh my God, they look at someone, look how their lives seem so much better.
What does this have to do with it?
Just trying to understand, there's a lot of social.
Representative Carson, and I'm going to say it's to everybody because everybody's doing the same thing. Representative Longo, is there a budget question related to this? I appreciate how everybody feels about
Sorry,
this
just
today.
project it
I know
more
it's a tough situation.
Just,
From
yeah.
a teacher and administrative standpoint and students and all, but
Okay.
it's in the
All right.
budget.
Just that I'm worried, there could be projected more
think
expense
everybody's
dealing with issues. Okay, one more question concerning the lapsing account. I watched the Board of Finance follow up with, and they addressed the FEMA grant. And at that point, they didn't know how it was going to be allocated. So it's definitely going to go into a lapsing account?
We're not sure yet. We're working through that with the town. We do have plans. We do have a commitment from the first select woman to work with us on that. And we're working with the Board of Ed on what those recommendations will come to be.
Okay, so it's still open and you'll have more, I guess, I know you'll wait till you get the money and it comes in before July 1st. It's treated one way versus that. So it's still an open question. Okay, just wanted clarification. Thank you very much.
Can I follow up, Mr. Moderator?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Representative Carson, yes, so I'm happy to hear that you watched the meeting. The board will be discussing this at our next meeting, hopefully. In addition to hearing some of the ideas that the superintendent has for use of those funds. But as Mrs. Laborious has stated, there's some mechanics and technical components to it that we're still trying to sort out from an auditing perspective, and also just what kind of fund or where this will land. So it's a TBD item. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, at this point, but happy to update everyone as it moves forward and just, where it lands.
Thank you, Representative Carson. Representative Pistilli.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sharon Pistilli, District 3. I have a few brief questions. The first is, how would we expect the cut for professional consultation for special ed of 213,000, and then also speech services of 263,000? I just wanted to confirm, these were actual cuts to the budget, or were these somehow these expenses were not like moved somewhere or something? And what are we expecting the impact on students to be? Because these seem like slightly big numbers to be cutting.
Year-to-year comparison from this year to next year's projected. We expect to be able to meet all mandated IEP needs with those projections. Our projections are partially due to, we have some contracted speech that we utilize to supplement the work of our speech pathologists in district. Those contracted hours we've had to use, and the contracted hours were less and the rate was a more favorable rate. And the same can be said for the professional consultations. We've been able to meet the needs of students this year with within budget, but we think we can meet it, below what we projected for this year, next year. I know that sounded wordy. I hope you understood what I said.
So even despite the fact that there's a higher incidence of needs for special education, are the fees, we're expecting the fees for professional consultation to go down?
I don't know if we're expecting the professional fees to go down. We're expecting with the projection that we're making for next year to meet the needs that we know that we are going to have to meet.
Okay, with that $213,000 cut.
That's correct.
Okay. And then, do we have a sense for what the return on investment will be for the Early Literacy Academy? And then related to that, for next year, are there other program investments that you'd suggest that would reduce the need for outplacement?
What I can say for the Early Literacy Academy, because we are proposing opening up a third cohort next year of up to 8 students, and annually we have 7 or 8 students. Currently, we have 15 students in 2 cohorts. Next year would be a cohort of 8. So as Superintendent Testani reported in his budget presentation, we realized an annual savings of about $550,000 for maintaining those students who are our students who have most significant cases of dyslexia. They've not been able to close the gap in their reading deficits despite programming in their home school. So we have this intensive program where without this program, we would have outplaced these students, or parents would have unilaterally placed at a facility that specializes in, the type of programming that we can now provide. It is a program that we do operate in consultation with Literacy How and Dr. Margie Gillis, who is a, national expert in the field of dyslexia and language-based learning disabilities. And we're fortunate she's local and chooses to work with us. So we do provide a great deal of professional development from her to our special ed teachers who work with students in the Early Literacy Academy, as well as our general education teachers who work with our students who are in the Early Literacy Academy when they're in general ed settings. And then she's also done a great deal of professional development with our general ed staff, so we can be responsive to the early literacy needs of all of our students.
All right, great. That sounds great. And then where there are other needs for outplacement, do we look at the clusters of what those needs are? And then can we take a look at program investments to, besides early literacy, are there other, clusters?
Yes, we have increased our district programming over the past 5 or 6 years. The board has, supported our initiatives to increase in district programming for students who may be in our complex learning cohorts. We've opened up several complex learning cohorts for students who, might be nonverbal, might have significant or severe autism, need assistance with feeding, need assistance with toileting. We've opened up several programs for students who have significant social, emotional, and mental health needs at the elementary level, as well as the middle school and high school levels, in an attempt to maintain students in their least restrictive environment, which is their home school, their home district, and to avoid the more costly outplacements for these students. We did a cost analysis or a cost benefit analysis of what it costs to program for students in district for our complex learner cohorts versus outplacing students. Because students in our complex learner cohorts are our most costly students, and we're saving millions of dollars a year on keeping kids in district versus having to pay for more costly outplacements. And right now, the biggest challenge we're having in district for students with disabilities at the elementary level, as Superintendent Testani said, it's students with behavioral issues or social emotional challenges at, starting in kindergarten, 1st grade and 2nd grade, and then at the middle school and high school, it's definitely we're being challenged by mental health. crises at students.
I'm going to follow up Representative Pistilli and point you in the direction into anyone who might be interested. Mr. Mancusi put together a wonderful presentation for the board at our December 13th meeting. So if you're interested in learning more about all of the programming, specialized programming that we have in our district, that is available in the backup for the December 13th, and it will tell you exactly the different kinds of programming, what the student counts look like that are enrolled in that programming currently, and it also gives you a physical picture of the offsets of what we're keeping by keeping kids in district. So that is a presentation that's available on our website, and I would highly encourage everyone to take a look at that so you have an understanding of all the things that we're doing for all the grades across the district and the wonderful work that Mr. McKesey is doing.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, I only have one last question. My understanding is that there is a program director for mental health and that the funding for that role was taken out of ARPA funds and instead like moved into the operating budget. I was just wondering why that was. If someone could explain that.
I'll take that. So when Mr. Testani originally presented the budget to the Board of Education, realizing that it was, and I'm not going to speak for you, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, it suggested that it be first put into the ARP funds versus the operating budget. And I can speak for myself in that I was concerned about doing that because it's a one-year grant-funded position for a program director of mental health and student services who would apply for that for 1 year. And if we really believed and valued the need for the role of that we should put it into the operating budget instead as a carry forward and not create a cliff for next year. But at the end, we moved other things, like I said previously, into the grant to offset. So again, it's a cliff issue and also an attraction issue for that role. So the board agreed and that was moved out of the proposed ARP placement for the position and put into the operating budget. So I hope that made sense.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your responses.
Thank you, Representative Pistilli. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Christine Brown, District 9. It's so nice to meet you all in person. Circling back to a question on special ed, but I appreciate everything that's being done in district, but specifically for out-of-district students. In your last slide, Mr. Testani, you said that we're further challenged with the recent state legislation that caps reimbursement at 70%. So if we have fewer students going out of district, but it's costing us more money, as you said earlier, I'm not familiar with this legislation. Could you explain how that's going to impact us? And as we go forward, is there any way to control those out-of-district costs, or is that just going to be unpredictable?
So I'll just take the first part about the reimbursement. So part of the passing of the legislation was in the past, excess costs were reimbursed for 4.5 times a formula that the state established that says, okay, if your per pupil expense is $20,000, for example, they take 4.5 times that, and then anything in excess of that number, we get reimbursed on a percentage basis. So, you know, if we were in excess of that number by 100,000, if we were to get 70%, we'd get 70,000 back. Traditionally, going back before this legislation, that number fluctuated really wildly year over year because the state was capped on its appropriation for that. So depending on the total expenses statewide, what percent they'd reimburse us. And we wouldn't know that until March. That was a challenge, but we're further challenged by the fact that they fixed that number, but they fixed it at 70%. The year before we were at 82%. So the difference between 82 and 70% is almost $1 million. Typically, it would swing that much sometimes from year to year, and we wouldn't know until March, which was part of the reason why we'd come back to the RTM, and it was challenged budgeting. We're challenged by the fact that it's 70% and it's capped because, as we're talking about, costs are rising greater than the cost of general ed is rising, number of students being identified. So we encourage everyone to talk to your state legislature to advocate for giving a more realistic reimbursement. And if you need additional information, Mrs. Jacobson is one of the biggest advocates for Fairfield up at the state legislature. And there was a part 2 to that question.
Right, the part 2 was, is there going to be any way to control for that? As costs continue to increase, like next year, let's say, Is this just gonna be sort of unpredictable?
Before Rob jumps in, I think part of it is looking at what programs we can further develop in-house and also looking at where we're sending kids. There are places that we have been assessing, and I know they've been assessing even prior to my arrival of the effectiveness of those programs. And if we can do a better job in-house to develop those programs to make sure that, again, keeping kids with their peers, close to home is the goal. I think those are some of the things that if we can bring some of those kids back that have gone out of district, and we can restore trust with those families, that we can do it as good a job as the outplacement or even better. I think that's going to be beneficial to us moving forward.
Thank you, Representative Brown. Representative Britton, finally, but
Thank you, Moderator. Peter Britton, District 10. Two questions. And the first would be focused on actual safety within the schools. Right? I don't know if it's in the budget or how it's in the budget. I'd be interested in your thoughts in terms of how that's being addressed. I see a lot of things in Congress about how people are putting forward different programs, because obviously that's a huge issue today, right? And what's going on with the shootings. Secondly, I'm concerned here a lot about the budget going forward, right? Can you give the body any sense of where we're going to go for 24, 25? I'm looking at, in particular, I'm kind of looking at this chart where, New Canaan, Wilton, and all of those schools who have a higher revenue per child, obviously, are the top performing schools in the town, in the state, right? And it seems like, as I look at the rankings that I've seen. So I'm just wondering, the combination of the contract that you mentioned, right, for that's going to have a significant increase. As long as, do we put more money in? Do we really get more benefit out of an increased budget? And if that relates to 2024, not to get ahead of ourselves, so I don't mean really be, pushing forward here, but I think it's something that would be good to have a sense of, if possible.
Well, I think right now from just talking with colleagues, the average teacher contract settlements are in 12% over 4 years. So about 3% a year. I think that's probably where most of them are landing right now. But to your point, I think also there's a change in demographics. I think the most recent number that I got from the town was that there was about 2,000 folks that moved into Fairfield since COVID from out of state. Many of those come here because of the reputation of the school system. And in my experience, a lot of the out-of-staters come here with students that do have specialized needs, and we are obligated to honor those needs here in the district. So I think further development of in-house programs are going to be to our advantage as more and more people come to Fairfield because of the reputation of the public schools, based on all the opportunities and programs that exist outside of just the classroom.
I'm going to follow up a little bit too for 24, 25, and I hear your concern. In addition to contract obligations, obviously, that will carry forward across all other contracts as well, is that, as you may have heard, there's this little thing called redistricting that we're talking about. And that's supposed to take place in 24, 25, and I obviously can't say right now, sitting here, where that will land or what additional items might be needed to implement that, whether it be additional staff, whether it be different busing situation, whatnot, or not, or maybe nothing, I can't say, but just to keep in your minds, that is also the year of implementation for that. And it is also the year that our nation says goodbye to the funds that Congress, gave to our schools. So while we can continue to spend those down for a little bit longer, they will not be able to be encumbered. So, we didn't get proportionately a huge amount of that money, and we have, like I said before, been very conscious to keep recurring items out of it. I foresee that happening and continuing, but next year could be tough.
But then the other issue of safety, how it affects the budget is about it.
Yeah, we are doing an assessment of our schools and some of the things that I'm sure will come out of the assessment will be an investment in looking at how we can improve. So we can't talk about that publicly, but there is a focus currently on assessing our current state of school security and identifying any places that we can make sure our kids come to school every day and they're safe, and they go home safe to their families.
I just want to say thank you to our community partners in that area too, our police department and our fire department, and those who help with drills that those schools have. And also we have a strong working relationship with them and constant communication for anything that they think, maybe need to be addressed. So I want to reassure everyone that, those are in place now. And then also, we also don't always think of cybersecurity as a security issue, but given the technology that's in some of our buildings, that's also an area that we invested in a few years ago to make sure, did an audit of and make sure our cyber areas were well protected. And made some changes a few years ago though. So it's kind of connected but different. So it is an area that we constantly are paying attention to.
Thank you, Representative Britt. Representative Rozier.
Hi, Amy Ruggiero. Thank you, moderator. Welcome, Mr. Tassani. It's great to have you here. Thank you, everyone, for all you've done. Similar to some of the questions we've already had, I was just wondering with, obviously you're speaking of enormous headwinds with the contractual liabilities and the negotiations coming up, the special education, mental health. Next year seems like it's going to be a very tough year, and obviously continue to attract and retain talent. I'd asked your predecessor if there was, any consideration to doing a grounds up audit or looking at kind of a rebuild of the budget. Obviously, I know that a lot of this is fixed costs, so it's very hard unless there's a structural change or something closes or something, significant happens. But I just wanted to see if that was a thought. Thank you.
We are talking a lot and looking at our staffing model. Tom and I have had extensive discussions around that as well. But the entire team to look at how we utilize staff. Are we getting a return on investment? Can we be better? So there's a constant assessment that's going to be happening to make sure that we do stay within a reasonably fiscally responsible budget year after year. The budget has grown significantly over the last decade here at Fairfield, and I'm not sure what that will look like 10 years from now, but we'll do our part to make sure that the town gets the best return on their investment without breaking the bank, so to speak. As a resident myself, I want to make sure that we are able to keep it affordable so families can continue to come here and take advantage of not only the schools, but all the parks and rec and all the other programs and things that Fairfield has to offer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rozier. We talked about what we're missing, and I want to go, where are we missing staff-wise? Like, what, due to the competitiveness, like, what are we missing certain subjects? Are we missing in elementary school? Where are we missing on staffing?
We're doing pretty well right now, but we do have the anticipated vacancies. And of course, it's scary to think because they are in the math area, the special education area, all the shortage areas, world language. So we have had some meetings as recently as yesterday with high school administration to look at schedules, to see if there's areas that we can be more efficient in, and in the instance that we're not able to find the staffing that we need, but be able to provide the same level of service. So we're constantly reevaluating. I think it's something that was just brought up that we need to look at to make sure that decisions that were made in the past, we are getting the return on that investment. And if not, we need to shift somewhere else. But we have to ask the hard questions. And when a principal says they need X, it may be an exchange for Y. Just can't keep adding and adding and adding. without seeing what the benefits are and in exchange for something else, because if we're adding a business teacher now for more business courses, that means those kids are not taking something else. So what are we going to reduce in order to sway the kids from X into business classes, for example? So we're constantly taking a look, and I think we're gonna do more of that during the course of the summer as well.
Because I think, I don't know how many years ago we were talking about with some physics teachers we were having an issue with, right? I don't know if that's still the case, but, and I get it. So if you only have X number of teachers, you only can have X sections of a certain class. So there may be 100 kids want to take it, but only 20 can, whatever it is. So, okay, that's tough. Representative Siebert on WebEx.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Testani, for putting forth a budget that I think will certainly continue to give the reason why so many people want to come to Fairfield from the quality of education for your tax dollar and the value of your homes for existing residents. My question to you is, I'm not sure if you can peel this onion, but my daughter was the benefit of an IEP plan, and because of that, she thrived and got her degree and has a great job. I was curious, of the 92% of the graduating high school students that went on to secondary school, is there a way to determine the percentage of those kids that received the kind of quality IEP, special ed, that helped them get to secondary school, and how we might benchmark against other towns in that area?
Yeah, we can pull that information to find out how many of those students that went on the post-secondary opportunities were the beneficiary of specialized services. There are some reports that on Ed site state that's available to the public that could do some comparison. I'm not sure. Oh, we can pull some of that information for you.
Great. That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Siebert. Representative Havey.
Thank you, Mr. Monitor. This is Lisa Havey, District 6. I have a question, sorry, about special education. But it refers to the gifted program. And I was wondering, when children are identified for special ed services, at what point are children identified for gifted programs? And is the gifted program still run through the special ed department? And anything you can add to all that? Thank you.
Yes, I know they're working on, revamping the Townsend Gifted Program. It's not run per se through the special education department, although we're consulted with through the curriculum office. Students are identified, and I believe programming starts in grade 3.
We are currently in consultation with other districts that have recently revamped and done a complete revision of their programs. And so we visited and we're in consultation with those folks so that we can bring back best practices here.
Thank you. And where would that funding be seen in the budget? And while you're looking, another question. Do you ever ask outlays for gifted programs?
No, we don't.
Hi, Representative. If you look at the staff section to start, I mean, this is just the gifted teachers, you will see under teaching staff in the area where they have like.
Sorry, what page?
Okay, so look, many pages, but what is that, 16? 16. Suite 16. You'll see library, media, classroom, MLL, which is our multilingual learners, gifted in STEAM, so there's staff allocated in here. That doesn't speak to other areas of the budget which would constitute, probably in the materials, I'm not sure section, but like the the assessment materials would be another budget area for that. So it's probably sprinkled in here across different areas, but the main part would probably, you're looking for is the staff component probably.
The assessment, just to add to that, is on page 47 within the instructional services. You know, given, we could look at potentially separating that out by a program code. So, Mr. Gerber referred to the program code page, since it is of interest, so that we can grab all of the pieces that are gifted. I happen to follow up through the chair to the group with a total dollar spent on the gifted program, because there are some things that are embedded, as Mr. Jacobson said, in the supplies lines as well. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Havey. Is the gifted FTE, do they go to multiple schools, or is it just a teacher that's in the current school?
Multiple schools.
Representative Gerber. Thank you. I'm supposed to say through you to. Yeah. Through you to, that's my ring as well. I'll do that. If we'll get me more time. But I've got a couple of questions, but one is a little trickier. And you can punt if you don't want to talk about it, but this idea of structural change, I never heard anyone actually say 2, 3, 4 things about what that actually means, but the term has been used a lot, maybe before you got here. I don't know if that's been thrown at you several times, but in the past, there was a sort of a constant, hammering. We thought we were going to get structural change. And then but does that mean closing schools, consolidating schools? Like, what is it actually? What are the 3 or 4 things that we could be looking at?
Oh, I think I'm not looking at big picture closing schools or anything like that. I think that's more part of the redistricting and the decisions of the Board of Education. But in my capacity, it would be looking at the staffing model, and is it getting the students what they need for the cost that we're investing in that? So whether it be, I don't want to use specific titles of positions, but then all of a sudden that causes some panic around folks that, oh, he's thinking of cutting these positions or cutting those positions. For example, we made a structural change by shifting these EPF positions into assistant principals. Now, in essence, it added a few dollars to the budget, but I think that is step one in possibility of looking at how we utilize other positions in the district, and if those positions can be reallocated to meet the needs of students in a different way. So I think those are structural changes in terms of my perspective on how we can do things differently, and utilize staff in a different way than we currently do.
Okay, just when I look at the total numbers on my favorite page 120, like the administration numbers, think that, I get the impression sort of at the Board of Finance level and the people that have talked about this in the past, or at the Board of Selectmen level, that structural change means bigger numbers than you could possibly get out of dramatic cut from
the administration side of things. So, and so in my mind, I'm always thinking, does this mean, consolidating schools? Is it plant, or is it larger class sizes or things like that? Because it's kind of hard to see. We'll get some savings, but it doesn't seem like the administrative sides at the total level is going to be terribly material, although it may be the right thing to do, for education.
Well, we did make some reductions in the administrative structure here at central office in this budget. Will that continue in future budgets? Possibly. There may be other areas that we can reorg, but just walking in on day one in the middle of the budget process at the beginning. So getting a little bit more time, being able to assess contributions from certain positions, and how that impacts students in the classroom is going to be important as we begin the process in the fall.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would be great level setter if at some point if you get bombarded with that term too many times to start bullet pointing out what it might mean, because there are going to be obviously consequences for any major structural changes that are not just with the residents, and some of the major ones they're not going to like. So kind of, sometimes we talk out of both sides of our mouth on that kind of stuff, but I'm going to move on. So thank you for your answer. I just have another question about IEPs, because it seems like there's been a lot of discussion about social and emotional learning. And I was skimming through some of the older, maybe stale at this point, improvement plans, district improvement plans, and school improvement plans. And I think there was this idea that we were going to have like a mandatory course, I believe, that something where we're going to be like every student was going to have to learn like coping skills. And is that on track, or have we kind of scrapped that? I don't.
Oh, advisory. There is a form of advisory that's happening at the high schools currently. I believe they meet regularly, but not. I don't know what to the extent compared to what the plan was, but could definitely look into.
I thought there was going to be like a course, like a mandatory course, a high school course that's going to incorporate social and emotional, learning and stress, dealing with stress and things like that.
Well, some of those things I would think you would already be covered under the health curriculum, and also we do run advisory periods with different topics, and there's also some of the programming that Mr. Mancusi has going on in our high schools, but I don't recall a required course. And just speaking for myself personally, given how tight the schedules are with the new graduation requirements and things that kids want to take, a required course would probably be quite difficult to require.
Well, I was wondering about because I think it's in the 2022 district, or maybe 21, 22 district improvement plans, but I might be wrong. I may have misread it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gerber. Representative Zesma.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Liz Zesma, District 4. Two pretty easy, I think, straightforward questions. If this was not already covered, what is our negotiating power, if at all, with the schools where students are outplaced to in terms of tuition? Is there anything that we do in terms of?
There's no. They set the rates, and that's pretty much it. There's not a negotiation that's had. They have operational costs and fixed costs, so we know what the costs are at the time that referrals are being made, and we have to pay accordingly.
And they've generally had increases every year, or is it less?
Generally every year, just like everything else, escalating costs with staff and utilities, insurance, same type of issues that the school districts face.
Okay, thanks. And one last question. So page 11 of the backup. So I'm happy to see that we're a little bit more towards the mean in terms of PPE. We were at one time at some abysmal number like 89th in the state. But what I can't see from this, and my question is, within our DIRG, okay, so for people listening, the district reference group, where are we in terms of the budget increase?
The ask for this year, they're all over the place right now.
Thinking about, I mean, I have some knowledge that the average, for Fairfield County, I just want to, let me start this up.
Within B.
Yeah, so just want to preface this conversation that people like to talk about DIRG still, and I understand it's an easy reference point, and, people like to compartmentalize that. So, but they're not really being used anymore, and they were from 2006, so I just want to preface that conversation, but actually, for Fairfield County comprehensive school districts, we were on the lower end. The average for Durg B was, where am I looking? Sorry, 4.76 on average. We were on the lower end of that. Durg A's were like 4.15 on average. So I'm just talking Fairfield County comprehensive school districts. I mean, I have a couple examples were jotted down just for reference if you want to know, but we were on the lower end of that, of the initial asks. What their towns have done, I don't know. Just what their initial Board of Ed asks were.
Right, thank you. And I think we've been more or less positioned that way for quite some time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Zesma. Representative Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you, just one more thing. And once again, I just really do want to thank you for all your patience and all your hard work. My husband, when he was at the New School getting a PhD in clinical psychology, there was a program for externships because, you know, all psychology, clinical work, you required to do unpaid externships. And he, you know, there'd been a program set up with the Coney Island Public Schools, and he worked there for like a year. And they got, you know, free labor, but had to supervise him, you know, and he had an amazing experience there. And I just double checked, and you know, Sacred Heart doesn't look like it has any program that might be helpful, but Fairfield has a school psychology master's, and I'm just wondering, I mean, you know, just for budgetary things, like, wouldn't it be great to get some externship program with them?
Yeah, we are looking at, we've just developed a partnership with Sacred Heart on cross endorsement, interns in special education. We have relationships with the colleges and universities. The big problem right now is there's limited number of folks going into the programs and large number of needs. So for speech language pathology, there's a very specialized program, I believe, in one university in the entire state. They take a cohort of 20. That services all private providers and 169 school districts. So therein lies the problem. God bless you. We have less and less people going into teacher prep programs, less and less people going into all of these programs, and the competition to solicit for those folks and recruit them is high. I mean, I stopped by the recruitment fair this afternoon. I spent about an hour there. I mean, there was a good amount of traffic, but mostly in the areas that we have very little need for, and not in the areas that we would be hoping to see people come through the door. So that's the biggest problem. Like you said, some of the universities don't have these programs, and there's only one program for speech language pathology in the entire state.
Thank you, Representative Gale. Representative Astorita.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ken Astorita, District 10, and this is just a request. I assume all the kids take like some sort of standardized achievement test, right? And Mr. Superintendent, you talked about, you know, the return on investment, which I think is extremely important, and I think it's a great way to look at the budget. Can we get the composite test scores for the kids in Fairfield, I don't know, maybe going back 5-10 years, and if it's also possible to see how they're doing against other districts in the state?
As I mentioned earlier, all that information is available to the public on Ed's site. It's Connecticut Department of Ed site. You can drill down by any district, any school in the entire state of Connecticut going back several years. And by subgroup, high needs, male, female, grade level, you name it, it's all there to the public. It's public information. But to your point, in this budget, there is an investment in a data warehouse platform that will be able to provide our educators data at their fingertips to be able to make better decisions on driving programs. We'll also make some of that data available to the public on our website as well. So that's part of the ask in this budget, is investing in a data warehouse where we'll be able to make it more accessible and more usable data, so it can drive programming decisions as we move forward.
That'd be great, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Astorita. Representative Spolier.
Hi, Representative Spolier, District 4. Just a quick question through you, Mr. Moderator. I know we'll probably discuss this more when we do get the teacher contract before us, but for those positions that are more in need, like the math, the science, the language arts, do you start those teachers on higher steps if they're newer teachers, or if they're, you know, if the level of years, let's say, is 5 years, do you possibly start them at a step that might be a 7-year if they're a subject that's more in need?
Yeah, we try to be a little bit giving in those areas, but we don't want to go too high on bringing in new staff, simply because it does take from and damage the morale of current staff members. But you know, we understand the realities, and sometimes they have multiple offers, so they may have an offer from a neighboring district, and if we go up a step or two, we can match that offer and be able to get them here in Fairfield.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Spolier. Anybody else? That's from 820. I think we answered that one. I think we got to him. Anybody else in the room? I mean, we lost our public, I think. I was going to have public comment, but there's none here. Is there anybody on WebEx for public comment? Put your name in the chat, please. Bueller? Anybody? Okay, I don't think there's anybody else. All right, well, I can say I really appreciate you all. You know, my dad had a teaching degree and was the chairman of the Board of Ed back in Huntington, Long Island, but he was a corporate trainer. My mom was a special ed teacher, and God rest their souls both. And my brother is retiring, I don't know, after 38 years as a 5th grade math teacher this year. So I grew up with education all around me, and I appreciate what you all do. And I'd like to call this meeting in adjournment. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.